The autumn sun barely peeked through Maria Thompson's bedroom window when her alarm blared at 5:30 a.m. She rolled out of bed with the disciplined precision that had earned her 3 world championships, though few in her quiet suburban neighborhood knew about her impressive athletic career. Her modern apartment, decorated with subtle hints of her success, a few framed photographs of raised gloves, and gleaming belts tucked away in her home office, told a story of understated excellence. This morning was different from her usual routine. Instead of heading straight to Knockout Gym, where she trained upcoming boxers for free before her own training sessions, Maria had to squeeze in a court appearance for a traffic violation. She stood before her bathroom mirror, carefully wrapping her calloused hands to protect them during her shortened morning workout. The woman staring back at her wasn't the fierce, lightning Thompson who had defended her welterweight title just 2 months ago. She was simply Maria, a 28-year-old trying to balance her professional life with everyday responsibilities. Her phone buzzed incessantly on the marble countertop. Her manager, Tony, had sent multiple messages about upcoming sponsorship deals and a potential title defense in Madison Square Garden. "Not now, Tony," she muttered, quickly typing a response to confirm their meeting later that afternoon. The real pressure today wasn't about boxing. It was about making it to court by 9 a.m. while maintaining her training schedule. Maria pulled her naturally curly hair into a neat bun and slipped into her compression gear. Over it, she layered a crisp white blouse and charcoal pencil skirt, proper attire for court that could be quickly changed for training afterward. Her protein shake whirred in the blender as she packed her gym bag with practiced efficiency. Hand wraps, gloves, spare clothes, and her lucky hand towel, a gift from her late grandmother who had always supported her dreams. The kitchen television hummed quietly in the background, showing highlights from last night's boxing matches. Maria smiled, recognizing several fighters she had mentored. Her own upcoming match wasn't just about defending a title. It was about showing those kids that dedication and hard work could open any door. Grabbing her protein shake and car keys, Maria checked her watch. 6:15 a.m. She had time for a quick training session before court. Her silver Camry, practical and reliable, waited in the driveway. As she placed her gym bag in the trunk, Mrs. Chen from next door waved while walking her poodle. "Early morning again, Maria," the elderly woman called out. "Always, Mrs. Chen. Those dreams won't chase themselves," Maria replied with a warm smile, remembering how Mrs. Chen had once brought her soup when she was recovering from a particularly tough match. The drive to Knockout Gym was quiet, streets still empty in the pre-dawn light. Maria mentally reviewed her schedule. Quick workout until 7:30, shower, change, courthouse by 8:45. The traffic ticket in her glove compartment seemed almost laughable compared to the challenges she'd faced in the ring, but Maria believed in facing every obstacle head-on, no matter how small. Pulling into the gym's parking lot, she noticed her star pupil, 16-year-old Jamie, already waiting outside. The teenager's dedication reminded Maria of herself at that age, hungry for success, willing to put in the work, and showing up even when no one was watching. She grabbed her bag, ready to start another day of balancing her worlds, knowing that the real challenge wasn't in the ring or the courtroom. It was in maintaining grace under pressure, no matter which hat she wore. The county courthouse stood imposing against the morning sky, its granite steps already crowded with people by 8:45 a.m. Maria Thompson climbed them purposefully, her heels clicking against the stone, gym bag discreetly tucked in her car's trunk. The familiar pre-fight butterflies fluttered in her stomach, though this time they weren't for an upcoming match, but for her first-ever court appearance. Inside, the security guard, a middle-aged man with kind eyes, smiled as he checked her ID. "Traffic court, 4th floor, room 407, he said, then paused, studying her face. "You know, you look awful familiar. Do you teach at the community center?" Maria just smiled politely, used to being recognized but not always placed. Her policy was simple: stay humble, stay focused. The elevator carried her up alongside a nervous-looking teenage boy and his mother, both dressed in their Sunday best. Maria caught the mother's anxious glance at her watch and offered a reassuring smile. "First time here too?" she asked softly. The mother nodded, and Maria felt a kinship with them. Everyone here had a story. Everyone was facing their own kind of fight. Room 407 buzzed with subdued energy. Maria found a seat in the middle row, observing the proceedings with the same attention she gave to studying opponents' fighting styles. Judge Robert Crawford presided with mechanical efficiency, his silver hair and wire-rimmed glasses giving him an air of detached authority. He worked through cases like a metronome, steady, predictable, unmoved. "Maria Thompson," the clerk called out eventually. As Maria rose, she felt dozens of eyes on her. She'd faced crowds of thousands in the ring, but something about this intimate scrutiny made her adjust her blouse self-consciously. Judge Crawford barely looked up from his papers as she approached the podium. "Miss Thompson, you're here contesting a traffic violation from September 15th, correct?" His voice carried the weariness of someone who'd heard every excuse imaginable. "Yes, Your Honor," Maria replied, her voice clear and steady. The same voice she used in pre-fight interviews. She reached into her folder, pulling out carefully organized photographs. "I have evidence that the speed limit sign was obscured by construction equipment on the day in question." For the first time, Judge Crawford looked up, seeming slightly surprised by her professional demeanor and preparation. His eyes narrowed slightly as he examined the photos she'd submitted. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Most cases were over in minutes, with defendants stumbling through excuses. From the gallery, Maria heard a sharp intake of breath followed by urgent whispering. She knew that sound. It was the sound of recognition, the same whisper that often spread through crowds when she entered an arena. A young law clerk at the side of the room was now staring at her open mouth, phone in hand. Judge Crawford, oblivious to the growing recognition in his courtroom, studied the photos with increasing interest. "These are quite thorough, Miss Thompson. Did you take these yourself?" "Yes, Your Honor. I believe in being prepared." She fought back a smile, remembering her trainer's constant mantra about preparation being the key to success, whether in the ring or in life. The whispers grew louder, and now even the bailiff was casting curious glances her way. The teenage boy from the elevator was frantically typing on his phone, his mother's eyes widening as she read whatever he was showing her. Judge Crawford, still focused on the evidence, remained the only person in the room unaware that standing before him was Lightning Thompson, the reigning welterweight champion of the world. The courtroom's atmosphere shifted as Judge Crawford examined the final photograph. He removed his reading glasses, rubbing the bridge of his nose with an air of mild irritation. "Miss Thompson, while your photographs are thorough, they don't change the fact that you were cited for speeding in a school zone." Maria stood her ground, poised as if in the ring before a crucial round. "Your Honor, if you'll notice the timestamp on the citation, it was 6:15 a.m. School zone restrictions don't begin until 7:00 a.m., as shown in the municipal code document I've included." The young law clerk could barely contain himself now. He practically bounced on his feet, clutching a phone displaying what was unmistakably Maria's latest championship bout. He whispered something to another court official, who quickly passed a note to the judge's bench. Judge Crawford glanced at the note with obvious annoyance at the interruption. His eyes scanned the paper, then darted back to Maria, then returned to the note. The change in his expression was subtle but unmistakable, like a man who just realized he'd been swimming with sharks without knowing it. "Miss Thompson," he began, his tone notably different, "it says here you're a professional athlete." A smile tugged at the corner of Maria's mouth. "Yes, Your Honor. I'm a boxer." She didn't elaborate further, letting the understated response hang in the air. The teenage boy in the gallery could no longer contain himself. "She's not just a boxer," he blurted out, earning a sharp look from his mother. "She's Lightning Thompson. She defended her title last month with a fourth-round knockout." Judge Crawford's glasses slipped slightly down his nose. The bailiff, now grinning openly, pulled up a video on his phone. The judge's eyes widened as he watched what was presumably footage from her recent title defense. "Order," he said, though without much force. The courtroom had already transformed from a place of stern justice to something approaching a sports venue. People were pulling up her highlights on their phones, sharing them with their neighbors. Maria remained composed, hands clasped in front of her. "Your Honor, I respect this court and your time. I'm not here as a boxer. I'm here as a citizen who believes there's been a misunderstanding about this citation." Her words seemed to center Judge Crawford, who straightened in his chair. He cleared his throat, clearly wrestling with this new dimension to what should have been a routine traffic case. The photos spread before him took on new meaning: the precise documentation, the attention to detail, the professional preparation. These weren't the actions of someone trying to dodge responsibility. They were the marks of a champion's discipline applied to everyday life. "Miss Thompson," he said finally, "your evidence regarding the school zone hours is compelling." He paused, a hint of admiration creeping into his voice. It's refreshing to see someone approach these proceedings with such thoroughness and respect for the process. The gallery held its collective breath. Maria maintained her professional demeanor, though inside she felt the familiar surge of anticipation that came before a referee's decision. She'd faced opponents in rings across the world, but this morning's battle in room 407 required a different kind of strength. The strength to stand quietly in the face of authority and trust in careful preparation. Outside room 407, the courthouse hallway had transformed into an impromptu meet and greet. Maria Thompson stood gracefully accepting handshakes and kind words from court staff and fellow citizens alike, her citation dismissed with Judge Crawford's apologies. The morning sun streamed through tall windows, catching the subtle highlights in her neat bun as she checked her watch. 10:15 a.m., still time to make it to the gym for her afternoon training session. The teenage boy from earlier, Jimmy, hovered nearby with his mother, clutching a crumpled piece of paper he'd torn from his notebook. His mother gently pushed him forward. "Go on," she whispered. "Ask her." Maria turned to them with a warm smile, the same one she'd shared in the elevator earlier. "Hello again," she said, immediately putting them at ease. "How did your case go?" "The judge was more lenient than we expected," Jimmy's mother replied, relief evident in her voice. "I think everyone's mood improved after your case." Jimmy stepped forward, his paper trembling slightly. "Miss Thompson, could you?" he stammered, his face flushing red. "Would you like an autograph?" Maria asked kindly, already reaching for the paper. As she signed, she noticed the court summons visible in his mother's purse. A truancy notice. "You know, Jimmy, I train young boxers at Knockout Gym every morning at 6 a.m. It's a great way to start the day, builds discipline." Jimmy's eyes widened. "Really? You train people?" "Only the ones who are serious about making positive changes," she replied, giving his mother a meaningful look. "The gym saved my life when I was your age. Sometimes we need to find our fight outside the ring to win the battles inside it." The young law clerk who had recognized her earlier approached, now composed but still excited. "Miss Thompson, Judge Crawford would like to speak with you in his chambers, if you have a moment." Maria followed the clerk, leaving Jimmy and his mother discussing early morning training possibilities. Judge Crawford's chambers were warmly lit, legal volumes lining the walls. The judge stood as she entered, his earlier courtroom formality softened. "Miss Thompson, I wanted to apologize personally for any inconvenience this morning," he began, gesturing for her to sit. "But more than that, I wanted to thank you." Maria tilted her head questioningly. "In 20 years on the bench, I've never seen someone handle themselves with such grace under pressure," he continued. "We get a lot of excuses in traffic court, but you came prepared, professional, and respectful, despite your status." "Status doesn't define character, Your Honor," Maria replied softly. "My first trainer taught me that. He said titles come and go, but how you carry yourself lasts forever." Judge Crawford nodded thoughtfully. "We're starting a youth intervention program at the courthouse. working with troubled teens. Would you consider speaking to them? Your story, your discipline, your professionalism. It might reach them in ways our lectures can't." Maria smiled, thinking of Jimmy in the hallway, of her early morning students at the gym, of her own path from uncertain teenager to champion. "I'd be honored, Your Honor. Sometimes people just need to see what's possible when you choose to fight the right battles." As she left the chambers, her phone buzzed. Tony, probably wondering where she was. But for once, Maria didn't feel rushed. Some mornings were about winning titles, and others were about touching lives. Today, somehow, had managed to be about both. The afternoon sun beat down on Knockout Gym's weathered sign as Maria pulled into her usual parking spot. Her morning in court had delayed her training schedule, but the experience had given her something more valuable than a few extra rounds on the heavy bag. Through the dusty windows, she could see her afternoon class already warming up, throwing shadows at imaginary opponents. Inside, the familiar scent of leather and determination filled the air. Tony, her manager of 8 years, paced near the ring while talking rapidly into his phone. His animated gestures stopped abruptly when he spotted her. "Where have you been? The documentary crew has been waiting for an hour." Maria had completely forgotten about the Sports Network feature they were filming about her upcoming title defense. Camera equipment cluttered the normally sparse gym floor, and a tired-looking production team huddled around coffee cups. "I'm sorry," she began, but stopped short when she noticed a familiar face among the crew. Jimmy, the teenager from court, stood awkwardly by the entrance with his mother, both still in their court clothes. "We looked up the gym as soon as we left the courthouse," his mother explained, a mix of hope and uncertainty in her voice. "Jimmy hasn't stopped talking about what you said." Tony's eyebrows shot up, recognizing a potential story angle. The documentary's director was already positioning cameras, sensing something authentic unfolding. But Maria waved them back, leading Jimmy and his mother to a quiet corner of the gym. "First rule of this gym," she said, pointing to a hand-painted sign on the wall. "What happens in here is about you, not the cameras." The sign listed the gym's principles: discipline, respect, purpose. Below it hung photos of various champions who'd trained there, including a younger Maria with her first amateur trophy. "But you're famous," Jimmy protested. "You've got film crews and everything." Maria smiled, unwrapping her hands from their court-appropriate manicure. "Famous is temporary. Character is forever. Want to learn how to wrap your hands properly?" For the next 15 minutes, Maria demonstrated proper hand-wrapping technique, the cameras forgotten as she explained the importance of protecting yourself before throwing any punches. Jimmy's mother watched, her earlier uncertainty giving way to appreciation as she observed Maria's patient instruction. The documentary crew filmed quietly from a distance, capturing something far more compelling than their planned interview. They recorded as Maria introduced Jimmy to the speed bag, as she corrected his stance, as she demonstrated the fundamental jab that had built her championship career. Other gym regulars began arriving for the afternoon session, and Maria smoothly integrated Jimmy into the group. These weren't celebrity athletes or title contenders. They were local kids, office workers, and everyday people finding their strength one punch at a time. Tony watched from the corner, shaking his head with a knowing smile. He'd seen this before: Maria's ability to spot someone who needed the gym as much as she had at their age. The documentary director approached him, speaking in hushed tones about changing the feature's angle to focus on Maria's community impact. As the afternoon sun cast long shadows through the gym's high windows, Maria watched Jimmy hitting the heavy bag with newfound purpose. His mother sat on a nearby bench, completing registration paperwork for the gym's youth program. The morning's court appearance, which had seemed like an inconvenience, had led them all here, to a moment of transformation much more significant than any traffic citation. "Time," Maria called out to the class. Everyone grabbed some water, then were doing footwork drills. She caught Jimmy's eye and winked. In the ring or in life, it was all about the fundamentals. 3 weeks had passed since the courthouse encounter. Knockout Gym hummed with early morning energy as Maria wrapped her hands, preparing for another training session. The gym had seen some changes: a fresh coat of paint on the walls, new equipment donated by local businesses, and most notably, a consistent stream of new faces inspired by the documentary's early promotional clips. Judge Crawford sat on a folding chair near the ring, his usual court attire replaced by casual workout clothes. He'd taken Maria up on her invitation to visit the gym and see firsthand how she was transforming lives. The morning youth program, now dubbed Champions in Training, had expanded to include mentoring and tutoring sessions alongside boxing training. "I never imagined this is what a boxing gym could be," the judge admitted, watching as Jimmy led a group of younger kids through their warm-up routine. The formerly troubled teen had become one of the gym's most dedicated members, arriving early each morning to help set up equipment. Maria smiled, adjusting the speed bag. "A ring is just a square space, Your Honor. It's what we learn about ourselves inside it that matters." She glanced at her watch. 2 hours until she needed to head to the downtown community center where she and Judge Crawford would speak to their first group of court-referred youth. The documentary crew had finished their feature, but its impact continued to ripple through the community. Local businesses had stepped up with sponsorships for the youth program, ensuring that any kid who wanted to train could do so regardless of their ability to pay. The city council was even discussing a grant to expand the gym's educational programs. Tony burst through the door, waving his phone excitedly. "Maria, the network wants to do a follow-up piece. They're calling it More Than a Champion. They want to focus on the youth program and the partnership with the court system. As long as it helps the kids," Maria replied, watching as one of her original students helped Jimmy perfect his jab technique. The sight of her students teaching others was more satisfying than any championship belt. Judge Crawford stood up, stretching his back. "Speaking of helping kids, you should see the change in my courtroom. Youth offender cases are down 15% since we started referring them to your program. Something about learning to box makes them think twice about getting into trouble." "It's not the boxing," Maria corrected gently. "It's having someone believe in them, giving them a place where they can fail safely and learn from it. That's what this gym did for me." The morning sun streamed through the windows, catching the dust motes in its beams. On the wall, among the photos of champions, hung a new edition, a framed picture of Maria and Judge Crawford shaking hands in front of the courthouse, with Jimmy and several other gym members standing proudly behind them. "Ready for your first lesson, Judge?" Maria asked, holding up a pair of hand wraps. "First rule: everyone starts with the basics, no matter who they are outside these walls." Judge Crawford nodded, a hint of nervousness crossing his usually composed face. "Teach me, champ, though I think you've already taught me more than you know." As Maria began demonstrating proper wrapping technique, she caught Jimmy's eye across the gym. He gave her a thumbs up before turning back to his students. In that moment, she realized that sometimes the biggest victories happen far from the spotlight, in quiet moments of transformation that change lives one lesson at a time. Madison Square Garden buzzed with anticipation on fight night. The sold-out crowd filled every seat, but this championship defense felt different from any other in Maria's career. In her dressing room, she sat quietly, hands already wrapped, surrounded by an unusual pre-fight gathering. Jimmy stood in the corner, proudly wearing his new assistant coach shirt, a position he'd earned through dedication and leadership at Knockout Gym. Judge Crawford occupied a chair near the door, looking distinctly out of place in his first-ever boxing event, but beaming with pride. In the 6 months since their courthouse encounter, he'd become a regular at the gym and one of its strongest advocates. "Your Honor," Maria said, breaking her pre-fight meditation, "thank you for being here tonight. It means a lot." The judge smiled, adjusting his casual clothes, a far cry from his judicial robes. "Wouldn't miss it, though I must admit, it's quite different from court proceedings." Tony burst into the room, excitement radiating from his face. "Maria, you won't believe this. The governor's here, And she's asking about our youth program. The state's interested in replicating it across other districts. Marriott nodded calmly, but inside her heart swelled. What had started as a simple traffic court appearance had snowballed into something extraordinary. The gym's Champions in Training program had already expanded to 3 other locations, each one helping young people find their path through discipline and mentorship. A knock at the door revealed a surprise visitor. Mrs. Chen, Maria's elderly neighbor, clutching a small container. "I brought your pre-fight soup," she announced proudly. "The same recipe I gave you before your first title defense." The room fell quiet as Maria accepted the container, touched by the gesture. This was why tonight felt different. It wasn't just about defending a title anymore. Each person in this room represented a thread in the tapestry of support and community she'd helped weave. 5 minutes, champ, the event coordinator called through the door. Maria stood, rolling her shoulders. Jimmy stepped forward with her robe, handling it with the reverence of someone who understood its significance. On the back, beneath her name, they'd added a new line: "Champion of the ring, champion of change." "Remember what you taught us, Coach," Jimmy said, his voice steady. "It's not about how hard you hit. It's about how well you live the principles outside the ring," Maria finished, giving him a fist bump. The motto had become a mantra at Knockout Gym, painted prominently on the wall alongside the growing collection of success stories. As she prepared to walk out, Judge Crawford cleared his throat. "Miss Thompson," he said formally, "the court system thanks you for your service to the community." Then, breaking into a grin, he added, "Now go show them what a real champion looks like." The hallway to the ring stretched before her, but Maria didn't feel alone. Behind her walked not just her corner team, but representatives of a movement larger than boxing. Jimmy, the future of the program. Judge Crawford, the bridge between justice and rehabilitation. Tony, who'd learned to see beyond just victories and purses. The roar of the crowd grew louder with each step. Through the curtain, Maria could see the bright lights of the arena, but her mind was already on tomorrow morning's youth class. Win or lose tonight, she knew her most important fight wasn't the one in the ring. It was the daily battle to make a difference in people's lives. 1 year later, Knockout Gym's doors opened extra early for a special celebration. Banners hung from the ceiling, and the usually sparse space had been transformed with chairs and a small podium. Maria's championship belt gleamed in a new display case, but it wasn't the centerpiece of today's gathering. Instead, all eyes were on the 20 teenagers standing proudly in their graduation uniforms. They represented the first graduating class of the Champions in Training program, now officially recognized by the State Education Board as an alternative education and rehabilitation program. Jimmy, wearing a crisp suit instead of his usual gym clothes, stood at the podium adjusting the microphone. "A year ago," he began, his voice steady, "I was sitting in traffic court, thinking my life was over because of some stupid mistakes. Then I met someone who showed me that our worst moments don't define us. They prepare us for our best moments." Maria sat in the front row between Judge Crawford and Tony, watching her first student become a leader in his own right. The documentary crew had returned for this moment, their cameras capturing what their initial story had helped create. Behind them, the gym's walls now displayed not just boxing achievements, but academic certificates, college acceptance letters, and success stories of all kinds. Judge Crawford leaned over and whispered, "Did you ever imagine that traffic ticket would lead to all this?" Maria smiled, remembering that morning in court. Since then, the program had spread to 15 cities, each location combining athletic training with mentorship, education, and community service. The state's juvenile crime rate had dropped significantly in areas where the program operated. Jimmy continued his speech, gesturing to his fellow graduates. "Each of us has a different story of how we got here. Some came through the courts, some through schools, some just walked in off the street. But we all found the same thing, a place where we could become our best selves." The audience included an impressive mix of people: city officials, education administrators, parents, and even a few professional athletes who'd heard about the program and become supporters. But Maria's eyes were drawn to the back of the room, where a new group of young people watched tentatively, tomorrow's first class. When it was Maria's turn to speak, she kept it simple. "Champions aren't born in the ring," she said, looking at each graduate. "They're made in the moments when no one's watching, when you choose to do the right thing even though it's hard. Each of you has become a champion, not because of how well you can box, but because of how well you've learned to fight for your future." After the ceremony, as families celebrated and photos were taken, Maria found herself back in her favorite corner of the gym, wrapping her hands for her daily training session. Some habits never changed. Jimmy joined her, still in his suit, but with hand wraps of his own. "Ready for your first day as a full-time coach?" she asked, knowing he'd accepted a position running the program's newest location. "Ready," he replied, then grinned. "But I still can't believe it all started with a traffic ticket." Maria looked around the gym, at the graduates taking pictures with their families, at Judge Crawford chatting with the new intake coordinator, at Tony showing some city officials the education center they'd built in the old storage room. "Sometimes," she said, throwing a practice jab, "life's biggest victories come from the fights we never expected to have." Above them, the gym's motto caught the morning sun: "Building champions in life." It wasn't just about boxing anymore. It never really had been.